If you feel absolutely nothing in your grief, are you doing it wrong? Or do you just feel nothing? Numbness inside grief is really normal and honestly to be expected, but I think we get it confused with denial. So let's talk about the difference. Let's talk about what emotional numbness is. Emotional numbness is a made-up term that's sort of a big bucket category of I'm not crying, I'm not sad, I'm not angry, I'm just sort of blank. In the clinical psychotherapy world, we would call this a flat affect. Literally, you're not getting anything. You don't have an expression on your face. You are just sort of monotone. Your emotional world is sort of flat and monotone and gray. There's nothing really happening. In the stages of grief model, remember that these stages of grief are a made-up system that has no resemblance whatsoever to normal, healthy human grief. Watch the video on the stages of grief to know what I'm talking about. But one of the stages in these stages of grief is denial. So just to get our terms straight, let's talk about what denial is and what emotional numbness is and where they overlap. So denial is, I have a hard time giving you a definition of denial without being snarky about it because it is part of those debunked stages of grief. But denial is like something that might be applied to you from the outside, right? You're not dealing with your dad's death very well. Maybe you're in denial, like if you're making jokes or the person doesn't see you crying all the time or whatever they think an acceptable expression of grief is. If you're not doing it when they can see you, then you're clearly not dealing with your grief and you're probably in denial. Denial is sort of this blanket term of you are not doing things the way that I think you should be doing them. That sounds really negative. So if we take my snark out of it, denial is a flavor of numbness. Denial is honestly a protective mechanism in the brain because the full weight of the emotional experience you're in, like your system can't take that at full blast. Numbness and denial are part of the nervous system, the brain, the heart's way of turning down the volume, putting some gates up so that you're not hit with the full flood of the entirety of the loss. So denial is not a bad thing, and numbness isn't a bad thing either. It's like a pause button for the pain so that your body has a chance to breathe. It has a chance to watch a ridiculous show. It's a pause button. Numbness is very similar, but I think, now as I'm saying this, I feel like maybe, at least in the way that I think about things, denial is a thing that gets applied to us from the outside. You're in denial. You're not dealing with this correctly. Right? And sometimes we say this to ourselves, like, I'm not crying all the time, maybe I'm in denial. Or I woke up this morning expecting my sister to call me the way she always did. Maybe part of me is in denial about the fact that she's dead. So denial is sort of this external category, external expectation that gets applied to what we're doing. Numbness is a little bit different. Numbness comes from the inside. It's this feeling of, I couldn't cry if I wanted to. I couldn't be mad if I tried. It's like this wall inside me that I can't get through no matter what I do. Numbness is maybe harder on us than somebody saying that we're in denial. Like denial is almost a choice and numbness isn't. Maybe that's the difference for me between numbness and denial is applied to you, and numbness is almost something that isn't a choice. I want to back up a little bit and talk about the different ways that grief shows up for different people. Just because you aren't crying doesn't mean you're doing grief wrong. Just because you aren't a crier doesn't mean that you're numb. It doesn't mean that you're checked out. It doesn't mean that you don't feel. Not crying, lots of people don't cry in their grief. If you weren't a person who cried before your loss happens and you're not crying now, that doesn't mean you're not grieving. It means that you are grieving in a way that is particular to you, and you're not a big crier. Your grief shows up in different ways. So if you are feeling numb, if you're worried or wondering if you are shut down or in denial or if you're numb, I think one thing to do is, what makes me think that? What makes me look at how I'm feeling, what I'm doing, how I'm grieving, how I'm responding, and say, I feel numb. Is it because I'm not crying? Well, am I a crier? Am I not a crier? Why am I putting this label of numbness on myself? That's one thing you might do with it. Another thing though is like, actually I cry all the time. Like I cry at commercials and I literally feel nothing in response to my brother's death. Like there is a callus there. There is a blank spot in the world where I do not feel anything. I think that can be really scary for people. Where am I? What happened? Like I am not even sure I'm here anymore. I don't feel anything. That can be really, really scary. This is one of the things that I love therapy for. I love therapy because being able to come into a space and say to somebody, I feel nothing, and know that that person hopefully has the skills to respond to that in a way that doesn't panic and doesn't try to cheerlead you out of it and doesn't tell you to manufacture fake emotions just so you feel something. Like that therapeutic relationship is often a really good one to take that feeling of numbness into and say, what is this and what do I do about it? So whether you have a therapist or you don't have a therapist, or you do and you still want to know, what do I do about feeling numb when I encounter it? Again, surprising nobody because I feel like I say this every single time, but step one is always going to be acknowledging it, not trying to push it away, not trying to pretend it's not there, not collapsing into it either, but to notice it and say, I don't know what this is, but there is a big blank callus over the world for me. So step one, notice what's happening for yourself. Step two, I think there can be some, how long, this is such the therapist thing to do, like putting my therapist hat on very clearly here, asking yourself those questions of how long have I felt this way? Have I felt this way in the past? Is this a clue for me that maybe I am tipping into clinical depression or some other things that could really use some professional perspective, right? For some people, that numbness, that blankness, that flat affect we talked about, sometimes that blankness, that flatness, that numbness is familiar and sometimes scary, sometimes not. But being able to recognize that for yourself and ask yourself, is this something that I've experienced before? And what happened as a result of this? Is this something I need to be concerned about? Is this something I need to take action around? Does this intersect for me with substance use or other addictive behaviors? Because sometimes numbness is part of a pattern of the emotions are so big and so powerful and overwhelm the skill set that I have, that honestly, my organisms, my brains, my heart's only response is flatness. This is nuance here. This is complexity, because numbness can mean so many different things for so many different people. And I'm mindful as I'm talking to you about this, that numbness can be part of addiction, can be part of self-harm. It can be part of a whole constellation of behaviors and beliefs and actions that we do because our emotions are in fact so big and so overwhelming that shutdown is all we can do. And like many human experiences and emotions, it's a spectrum. Numbness could be, I just need a break. This grief experience has been so full on for so long that checking out is a relief and I need it. It's weird, and maybe other people think that I'm too numb and shouldn't be doing this and need to come back to life and need to show them some other aspects of my personality or my emotional depth, but I need this blank spot for my own sanity. I want you to get into the habit of asking yourself, what flavor of numbness is this? And how much distress does it cause me? Not how much distress does it cause anybody else. We'll get there in a second, but how much distress does this cause me? How worried am I about this? Is there something more to explore here? Safety first, please. If you are concerned about your own safety, if you're concerned that this is actually a wall that's getting built and it might draw me into an addictive behavior, or it might draw me into self-harm, or I'm not eating, sleeping, taking care of activities of daily living, I am shutting down the world kind of numbness, I really do want you to reach out for help and support. There are people who have been in that place. There are people who know what to do with that place with kindness and respect and good boundaries and skills. Explore your own flavor of numbness. I would be letting down my own moral and ethical code and letting down my moral and ethical professional ethics code if I did not mention that sometimes numbness is a safety issue. And I need you to pay attention to that. Okay, so safety issues addressed and aside, let's talk about what to do with either people who care about you are saying you seem kind of checked out, you seem kind of flat or blank or numb, and what to do if you feel like this numbness is a little bit much and I would actually like to feel more connected to myself, more fluid and flexible and access emotions instead of this like single one channel white tundra with in a white outfit sort of thing, like everything just. So if you are dealing with judgment, even well-meaning, kind, loving judgment from the outside, hey, you seem really checked out, you seem really flat, you don't seem to have a lot of color to you, you could have a conversation about that. You can say, oh, thanks for noticing. That's not the way that I feel about it. What are you concerned about? Or it sounds like you think because I'm not crying on you all of the time that I am numb or in denial. Is that true? I love to meet somebody's judgment with, sounds like this is what you're thinking. Is that true? One, it clarifies the situation, and two, it makes them say their quiet judgment out loud. I always like to make people say the quiet parts out loud because then we can do something about it. If somebody's saying to me, hey, you seem really checked out and really numb lately, and I haven't been feeling that way, and I say something like, tell me why you feel that way. Or what are you seeing that makes you think that I'm numb and checked out? I want to hear their assumptions so that I can either correct them or say, thanks for your opinion. That's not how I feel. Whatever it is, right? It just gets us out of this, you seem so numb, I'm not numb, you seem so numb. Like it gets us out of that sort of cartoon, not dealing with it thing. So it's always okay if somebody says to you, hey, you seem really fill in the blank. In this case, you seem really numb or checked out. It's okay to say, thanks for your concern. That's not how I feel. I'd love to talk about something else. Boundaries. Boundaries in all things. Let's bring this back to you though, trying to come back full circle here to numbness is a really normal part of grief. It's something that happens for a lot of people, maybe even everybody. Maybe that numbness is shorter for some people and longer for others, but numbness is not a sign of unhealthy grief. It's actually a really normal human experience. Humans are gonna human. It is what we do. It's what I talked about in the beginning, that the full force of the totality, the enormity of whatever it is you're facing, that is a lot for the human system to take in all at once. This is why denial and numbness get conflated or confused sometimes. Numbness can really be your system taking a timeout. If you feel like that's happening too much or you don't like it or this is a strange feeling for me, how do I come back into depth and color and movement? How do I not be in this numbness anymore? It's a dance, right? It is, I notice that I've been feeling really numb and it feels weird. So maybe I need to watch that incredibly sappy, emotional, heartstring pulling phone commercial. Maybe I need to purposely go looking for something that brings up emotion in me. Sometimes you just need a really good cry, but you can't get there. So go watch the Hallmark Channel or whatever it is that is going to bring that up for you. It doesn't even have to be your own authentic emotion. Sometimes we just need to prime that pump. Sometimes we just need to, it's not so much fake it until you make it. It is let me approach an emotional state in a way that isn't going to overwhelm me and that lets my body remember what it is like to feel. How do you do that in a way that is lower stakes and for a shorter duration so that your system doesn't stay in lockdown? I think, again, we have this idea that it's all or nothing, full flood of emotion or completely locked down forever. No, you get to have gates and dams and timeouts in this. It is not an all or nothing fest. Feeling numb is a really normal part of grief. It's not a pathology. It's not a sign that you're doing it wrong. It is an opportunity for you to reflect on, what's this happening for? Why is this up for me? Right? That was a very inelegant way of saying check in with yourself. Notice that you are feeling flat or numb or turned off. and be curious about it. Then you get to decide what you want to do next.